Good afternoon again, everyone, and welcome back to this Sydney Summit Live, being streamed live on Twitch. Joining me, Jared Spiegel, Solutions Architect from Amazon Web Services on stage. My tongue's getting tired at the moment, right. Apologies. We've got Gabe Holom.
Hi.
He is one of our technical evangelists out of Singapore, and also joining us is special guest Brent Maxwell,
Welcome, Brent.
one of my fellow solutions architects based out of Sydney office. So yesterday you had a breakout session over at room number 1 over there, the other side of the hall, and you're also having much the same discussion and same talk at the Dev Bytes Lounge a bit later on this afternoon at 3 p.m. Would you mind explaining to the audience exactly what you've been talking about?
Yeah, so this one is a talk that I've set up about doing DevOps at scale in the enterprise, specifically around continuous delivery. So it's something that we see getting a little challenging when you've got these enterprises spinning up big DevOps practices across a whole bunch of teams and environments.
Awesome. So with that, obviously, given that you had a full breakout session and you'd obviously got some interactive content and a nice big demo that you'd like to show us, we'll try and keep it brief if that's okay.
Yeah, no problem. So do you want me to switch to demo for you?
Let's jump straight into the demo.
Excellent.
That's the exciting part.
Let's do it.
Let's show something. Start showing some code samples and showing what we're actually showing to the people here at AWS Sydney Summit, to the audience.
So we switch to my screen, okay?
Yep.
Excellent. Cool. Well, I'm just going to play Space Invaders.
Nice.
It's called Docker
Let's
Invasion.
just do this for the rest of the session.
Yeah, I'm going to do that.
It looks like the ship from Galaga.
That's exactly right. So what I've got here is just a tiny little Space Invaders clone that's running in a Docker ECS container. And so the way that we've got this set up is we've got a couple of microservices. We've got a little game service, which is running that core game. And we've got a little top source service that just records the top scores of everybody that plays that game.
Okay.
So feel free to go to production.labmarkers.com if you want to have a little play along. So that's my colleague's account. So what I'm going to do just quickly is show you what our pipeline looks like. So when we make code changes to this, basically it's going to run through the alien pipeline, and this is for the game service. It runs through the source stage, where we're using code commit, the build stage, where we're using code build to package up the Docker container. Then it deploys out to the dev environment and deploys to production. We got a little manual approval in there to gate that to prod.
Cool. Okay.
So I'm just going to switch across really quickly and make a little change to the game. So
could you change something like the background color? Let's turn it from, say, black to something different.
It looks like we've already got that prepped.
He's already got that prepped.
Here's what I prepared earlier. So
okay, how come you're reading hex colors, Jared? What color is that going to be?
Is it a pink?
How did you know? It's my favorite color. It's actually amaranth. That's my favorite color. Okay,
It's
so
RGB, so it's big R value, more red.
Is that your host name? 3C15C2 blah blah blah?
Yeah, I know.
You have the best host name ever.
Standard AWS build. So basically what I've just done is committed the change. I'm just pushing it up to our Git repo with it tethered to my mobile phone, so fingers crossed that the 4G works. Oh, look at that, lightning fast. Cool, so the way that'll work is it's going to pick it up here at the code commit stage. So code pipeline's sitting there like polling that. But I'm not going to wait for it because who knows how long that could take. Oh, there it is.
At least
it just came up
the
for
build
you.
Started now. So
yeah, that's right. So the build started. So you can pick up, can you see we've got all the automation hooked up off that code change. So what I'm just going to do is tell you a little bit more about exactly how we've got this set up. Now, the talk yesterday, and what I'm going to run you through is about not just standard DevOps stuff, but how you do this at scale. So a lot of customers start off with a small number of accounts, and that kind of rapidly expands in enterprise. And so we're trying to create a situation for customers where they've got a bit of line of sight on how to set up multi-account strategies.
So there's a bit of a running joke that we have here is I'm always talking about my enterprise customers, and yeah, my enterprise customers have hundreds of accounts.
Yep.
And so really being able to scale out these DevOps pipelines and these CI/CD pipelines is a real challenge for them. We don't want to run a CI/CD instance in every single account. We need to be able to scale better than that.
Yeah, exactly. So basically what we've got for our little demo setup is we've got, as a developer, I'll check in a change to code commit.
Yep.
Code commit's then going to,
once code pipeline will kick it off to code build.
That's exactly right. Push it to code build. Code build is then going to create that Docker image image based on the code change, write that into our Elastic Container Registry. Now then, Code Pipeline is going to assume a cross-account role, and it's going to hit the dev account.
Okay.
So we've got our pipeline in a completely independent DevOps account. Now, assuming a role in that dev account, then it's going to hit CloudFormation and push out the change to the ECS container, which will then pull the Docker container out of the container registry, push it into EC2. And then there's a gate to production, which is our...
We saw that in the pipeline.
You saw that in the pipeline? That's the manual one?
I mean, some organizations also want to be able to have a manual approval step before something goes on, because some organizations are really comfortable with continuous delivery. Other organizations still want to be able to make deployments at certain times, say at quiet times and quiet periods.
That's right.
And so something like this gives you that flexibility.
That's true. And I think it's important to note, though, that the gates don't have to be manual. You don't have to click something. The gate might be something that's automated based on a bunch of different checks. So you might decide, I don't want deployments to occur in these time windows because our systems are busy then, or
during this amount of load.
Yeah, exactly. Like whenever there's high loads.
You could do additional user acceptance testing or and have automated tests where it's running against your pre-production environment, and then have that as your gating mechanism. Once all of those have succeeded and passed, then promote to production.
That is exactly right. So I'd love to inspire people to not have a manual gate. Start with that, and then see how well you can get your automation set up so you don't need to do it ideally.
Ultimately, continuous deployment is the ultimate end state for a lot of organizations who are wanting to be agile with their development and deployment techniques.
And that's what this is about. The whole reason we're doing this is to try to get people to move more quickly, because you don't need to necessarily have everything in multiple pipelines in multiple accounts.
Sure.
So anyway, in our little demo, basically the same thing happens in production. Once you clear that gate, cross-account role, do the same thing with the deployment. So let's just have a really quick look to see how far we've got in the pipeline. Okay, so it's still ticking off. So let's switch back across, and we'll just talk through some more stuff.
So we were talking about enterprise and DevOps. What sort of patterns do you see with enterprises adopting DevOps these days?
So a lot of the time, we see people starting out by having a pipeline in each different environment or account. So what we're starting to see is that that's causing people problems, because if you've got a pipeline doing all your automation in dev, and the different one doing it in test, and a different one in prod, then those pipelines inevitably change over time.
Okay.
So that's one of the common patterns that we see. And then, once people mature a bit more and they start saying, oh, we want to see our pipeline that covers our whole delivery cycle, they might span it out across the environments, but they still will base it in a dev account or a prod account, and either of those have problems.
So I'm going to put my enterprise hat on again here. It's a bit of a cliche that we keep on going, but I'll keep running with it.
What does the enterprise hat look like? Is it a fedora? Is it a bowler? Okay.
Maybe you should ask Fawn. Maybe you should ask Fawn. But what are some of the challenges that you see with enterprise customers being able to enable DevOps practices at scale?
Sorry, say again?
Sorry, what are some of the challenges that you see enterprise customers face when they're trying to adopt DevOps practices at scale?
Yeah, so I think what tends to happen is when you go from having a couple of accounts to having this massive proliferation inside your organization, having some sort of consistency in the practices, because often companies will start spinning up like a cloud center of excellence, and they'll want to have some sort of degree of centralized control, but then you'll have dev teams that are really trying to get their own independent autonomy. And I mean, as cloud practitioners, you want that autonomy. Yep. So trying to balance up what responsibilities live under centralized control and what is living being managed by the development teams themselves is something a bit unique. So that's split between having DevOps accounts for the different departments, for example, versus InfoSec and Cloud Center of Excellence having some auto provisioning capabilities. That's one of the challenges. Okay.
And having a separate CD account sounds like something that you might want to have to set up. What's the thinking behind that? Why would we set it up that way?
Yeah, so I think the main idea is that if you've got your pipelines running in the environment, it kind of gets conflated. The purpose of an environment is to isolate your application changes, and having it in its own DevOps account means that you can have your pipelines, you could have chaos engineering tools in there, you can have your other DevOps tools in a way that's managed sort of separately to the application changing as your business wants
even
software
think
to
about that.
change.
Okay.
So it sounds
Yeah.
like we've got a bit of a reference pattern here potentially for the creation of accounts. So is there any information you give the audience on what are the best practices to be able to to be able to create some of those accounts?
Yeah, definitely. AWS Organizations is our key. AWS Organizations lets you provision accounts automatically using APIs or command line. So we're recommending that particularly those centralized teams, InfoSec, CCOE, Cloud Center of Excellence, that they're provisioning stuff out to the different departments using organizations because they've got control over policies and the way that services are being consumed, as well as visibility and line of sight of what's happening out there across the organization as these accounts get spun up.
Cool. Sorry to interrupt, but if you see these balls coming up stage, they're question balls. So we have a question from Cloudy McCloudface on the stream. He asks, or she asks, do I have to use ECS? Can I use Kubernetes instead?
That is fantastic. I'd like to point out that that question was asked by Cloudy McCloudface.
Yes. Awesome name.
So absolutely not. No, definitely not. And this is the great thing about the cross-account roles. You can assume whatever permissions your pipeline damn well wants. So if you want to use ECS, use ECS. If you want to use Kubernetes, if you want to use EC2, Lambda, whatever it is, it's defined in the permissions policy that resides in those accounts that allow the DevOps account to do those cross-account activities.
And funnily enough, I actually have a customer, again, putting my enterprise hat on, I've got a customer, Fairfax Media, that specifically uses a similar pattern to be able to roll out onto a Kubernetes platform on top of ECS. And likewise, there's no reason why you can't roll that out to an EKS platform potentially when that service becomes generally available, or even right now if you're lucky enough to be on the preview.
Absolutely. I mean, the demo, we've got two different services to try and show you that it's not about ECS. We've got the Lambda being used for the top score service to demo that, Lambda as well, same sort of thing. So we're actually using CloudFormation to propagate those changes out across the accounts.
So we talked about best practices a little moment ago. Are there any anti-patterns that we also see? Because it's like matter. For matter, there's anti-matter.
Yeah.
For best practices, there are anti-practices.
That is a great way of looking at it. Yeah, definitely. So like I was saying before, I think one of the common ones is having pipelines in their own individual accounts. That's one of the challenges that we see. Having them in a dev account, which has a lower security profile, then committing code changes through to a production account is a bit risky. And likewise, if you have a pipeline spanning your environments that's living in the prod account, then it's going to be really hard to change that because prod accounts tend to be locked down quite a bit.
Okay, so we're starting to have we only have a couple of minutes left before we have to head on to the next session. But do you want to get back to the demo?
Yeah, sure.
Let's see how that screen. It looks like it's waiting for manual approval.
Exactly. It's waiting for me to click the
happy
gauging
button.
mechanism.
That
So you can see here that we're using Workmail, which is a great email service that we've got. So let's check what the dev environment looks like. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Okay, excellent. So we can see that we can now fly Space Invaders in the beautiful amaranth of space. So that works.
It's totally Galaga. It's not Space Invaders. Totally different
it's
games.
Docker Invasion. It's totally different. And then if you click the approve button, this little link in the email will pump you through to the code pipeline.
Nice. You can even write a comment here. Okay.
Bring the amaranth. And then when you approve that change, that's our manual gate. Yeah, that's the gate that we mentioned before. So you can see the build succeeded, the manual approval succeeded. So that's going to get picked up, and that's going to push that change out to production.
And how fast will that show up in production?
That'll show up in production in probably about a minute, which is probably not enough time. But I think you get the message. You've seen that beautiful amaranth of space. You've seen how these pipelines can propagate seamlessly across accounts.
So what kind of impact does this have overall on organizations' release velocity? Driving velocity within organizations and using DevOps as an enabler to increase that velocity. How does that have an impact on that velocity?
Yeah, so the reason it speeds things up is that it means that instead of worrying about who's managing which accounts and what the security profile is of those accounts, you can have it really well defined in one place. And you can see, like, there's no implications to timing as to how you reach across accounts. It's all done at the same velocity. And the other reason is that having a single pipeline means you're building artifacts once and you're building confidence about moving those artifacts across the different environments. So it just speeds everything up because you're building less often and you're pushing things through, and everyone's clear about it across the different teams, how things are structured.
Cool. As you saw, we've got another question here. This one's from Dougie. Dougie asks, did you ever play the 80s version of Space Invaders? I did.
I did, absolutely. Born in the early 80s, baby. Yeah!
Right on.
So we're going to getting close to where we have to wrap up. Just where can we find more information on what you've been speaking about?
So we've got a little Git repo available on AWS Labs that tells you how to do the cross-account stuff. So that code's out there in the wild. We are also going to have the Summit, my breakout session recorded, and that'll be available in the next week or two online. And if you're in the Summit and you want to come down and check it out, as Jared said at the start, 3 p.m. at the DevBytes booth.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Brent.
Thanks, Brent.
It's great having you
Thanks,
on stage.
guys. It was a pleasure.
It's been fun.
Stay tuned. Stay tuned on Twitch TV. We are going to be coming back in around about 5 minutes' time. We will have a very special guest joining us this time, AWS community hero and Alexa champion, Drew Fearment. He is from a Cloud Guru. We've got a Cloud Guru team over there. Hello, guys.
Cloud Guru.
And he'll be talking all things about building Alexa skills. So stay tuned. We'll be back in 5 minutes. Thank you.
Don't go away.